Hello, friends and allies. We have something special. We're apparently pushing a camera cord with a hothead. Doesn't look like it's damaging anything, but that's interesting. I think that's a first. But I have a bit of a special print today. If you look at what's going on already, it's already showing something pretty unique compared to normal. So I'm running a 0.6 millimeter nozzle. So that's the largest one I have right now. They do make a 0.8 for this machine, but I do not own it yet. So this is as thick a line as I can print, but even more unusual is the layer thickness. I tried this print once already at 0.1 millimeter layers, which actually it still says we're doing. That is not the case. Those are actually 0.42 millimeter layers. So the thickness of those layers, like look how chonky that is. That is a lot of material all at once. And it's working pretty well. We are using the stock bamboo textured PEI build plate. And hopefully this all just goes according to plan. But this entire experiment, aside from printing the lid, which I will use, this entire experiment has been outlined to optimize the view that this nozzle camera gets. Nozzle camera itself isn't quite, maximum quality. It's only 720p. It could be a little clearer, but at this focal range, that's as close as we can tune it in. So we're doing the octagram spiral pattern for the bottom, and there's only going to be one layer of top surface on top of this octagram spiral. So the hope is, well, there's a couple of hopes. One is that we get essentially transparency. Thicker lines, hotter temperatures, they all will improve the clarity of this material when it's clear like this. This material itself is Polylite PETG. It's their traditional classic formula, not their new PETG, but it's good stuff. It's been consistent as long as it's not, soaking up a whole bunch of moisture from the environment. It prints great. So good filament goes a long way. Making sure that it's dry goes a long way. I actually have this printing out of a Sunlu single spool dryer, just a little old one, but it is preheating the filament to about 50 Celsius, which is actually helping it print even nicer. So that extra heat, that extra dryness can help, especially with materials that run a little better when they're warm. PETG happens to be one of those. ABS likes some extra heat as well. I'm not sure if PLA really benefits much from preheating. It has a way of over softening because its softening temperature is so much lower. But it very well might be similar in that regard. But this entire print is basically been set up to provide an optimal view of the printing experience here, especially with that nozzle camera. So as it proceeds, we'll see one great big thick layer with this octagram spiral pattern going on, and that'll be our bottom. And then it's going to do another layer on top that, if all goes according to plan, is going to look really cool. I have it doing what's called a Archimedean chords for the top layer. So because there's only two layers, we're going to have essentially spiral wound going from the middle outwards on top, and then this octagram spiral underneath. And because it's all transparent, the hope is that I can kind of not only see the octagram spiral, which I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to see it quite well, I wanted to be able to see inside the container to an extent, or at least see what color of material is inside. Because what I use the sorbet container this is going on for is for basically waste plastic. I separate by material and color so that I can do casting and molding and still get some usable looking parts. I have some silicone coming. I ended up getting 30A hardness, so it should be rigid compared to the 15A stuff that, you know, is quite popular on Amazon. My 30A stuff came from Amazon as well. It's just a harder blend, still rated for the same temperatures and all that, but I'm hoping that part accuracy benefits from the harder silicone. So that can all be done essentially in an oven. You can melt PLA in an oven fairly easily. You just want to do it really slowly so that you're not overheating the silicone. You also don't really want to use your food oven if you can avoid it. If you do overheat the material, even PLA can generate some toxic stuff when you're burning it, so you don't really want to push it that hard. You want to heat it up slowly. You want to let it just melt over time. Hold it at that just above melting temperature for as long as it takes to let it melt naturally. That way you're not going to wreck your silicone mold or generate a bunch of burnt plastic fumes. You really want to just hang as close to that melting point as you can and just let time do the difference. But we're still waiting. We might actually be receiving the silicone for that today. It might be tomorrow or Monday, but I think it's in today's batch. I can have a look shortly, but can't remember offhand at the moment. This is looking really good, though. I don't see any issues so far. I haven't even seen a single strand sticking up or sticking out. No gobs. So it's very clean thus far. I didn't even bother to level the print bed on this one because I just did one of these in the same material, and the print bed essentially didn't move. So, oh, there was a little strand buckle there. It kind of popped up a little bit, but I'm guessing that we're just going to pave over that with the next layer, and it's going to be okay. Because the next layer is essentially going to be one continuous path, there's no jumps. It's going to start in the middle and it's going to work its way out in a spiral. Because of that, it's all one continuous path. I'm guessing that we're going to have really good reliability when it comes to how well that material sticks down. I don't expect we're going to have a lot of, free strands, stringing, globs. I think it's going to be pretty okay. This is a very thick nozzle. There's not really a whole lot of thin lines coming out of it. The only reason something would stick up is if it just failed to adhere to the build plate, or, oh, there's a little tiny bit there, but I don't think it really caused a deformation. Just a little bit of that plastic line just got pushed instead of grabbing onto the side wall. Yeah, we can see the one strand sticking up there. Hopefully it doesn't stick to the hot end, but it could. You don't want a death blob. You can do it. Okay, I think it's okay. Doesn't look like it generated any real issue there, so. This octagram spiral pattern, we're starting to be able to see it in the top camera there. Top wise cam, providing a nice little view of that. It's gonna do these kind of 90-degree surface angles And what that generates is a lot of really good reflective, almost holographic texture. As we move it in the light, it should catch light at different angles and different ways and really give it that kind of holographic sheen. Um, this pattern done in silk filaments is absolutely gorgeous. The way that the surface turns out is incredible, and the shine hitting it, it really is, you know, either completely holographic or bordering on it, you know. Some of the first prints I did with my multicolored machines were playing card boxes. I did one for my mom, and we'd use gold silk PLA that just looked gorgeous. And it was more of a golden yellow, to be fair, than a gold, but it looked incredible with the silk. So, knock on wood, we get a nice effect out of this surface. Oh, another little strand there. There's a little bit of a blob from that one. It picked up some of that strand on the side of the hot end. So we'll have to keep an eye on it. That falls into the part after building up real big. What happens is it likes to collide with the nozzle. I'm not really worried about this print having collisions, not because it's guaranteed to not have any, but because there's so much surface area stuck to the bed that it's not likely to bust the print off the bed. I think this is going to be stuck down hard enough that even if it did have a collision like that running into a blob, it's going to just power through it. The part should stay on the bed. There's just so much holding it to the bed that I don't see it coming off with a little collision. Smaller parts, different materials, totally, yeah, big risk. But I don't think the risk is really that high on this print. Hopefully, we don't see any death blobs build up. Because even if it doesn't wreck the print, it can cause some ugliness, and we don't really want it. So, fingers crossed, this all goes well. But this has been pretty good so far. It's looking not bad. We're getting super thick lines going down. This is actually quite a bit of flow. Not more than this machine can handle, or even really encroaching on its limits. But it is definitely pushing more material. It's able to push it pretty easily through a 0.6 nozzle. It's a nice big orifice. But still, if it's not hot enough, and therefore viscous enough, thin enough, essentially it gets thinner as it's heating, it will have a harder time pushing it, and there will be higher back pressure, and that can lead to what I would call a lag between when it pushes the plastic, and when it actually hits the print bed and sticks in place. So if it's too laggy, too slow to move that material through the nozzle, it's not going to land where it thinks it's going to, and we're going to end up with inaccuracy, and it's just gonna not look very good. We can get layer shifting that way. We can get not so much full layer shifting, but more like ringing, where it's sticking out from where it should be, or it's cut the corner instead of rounding it. And that's a series of settings relating to pressure advance, it's called. It's kind of like pre-pushing so that it lands in the right spot at the right time. And there's a whole bunch of tuning we can do in these machines for that. I've really only done basic tuning to this machine, and it's enough to just say print and go for the most part. But if I was doing something really, really touchy, I could run into issues even with just a basic tuning. There's some really fancy options for pressure advance where instead of using kind of one set factor for how early it pushes, it uses a curve that as speed increases on the print, that pressure advance amount increases as well. The faster you're printing, the more likely you are to need higher pressure advance amounts. So you can do it. I just haven't done the advanced pressure advance tuning. The reason for that is it's largely still in beta in Bamboo Studio, and I think even other slicers it's more or less in beta as well. I don't think it's fully tested and implemented. I think it's still kind of an experimental feature. I'm sure it does work. I just don't know how well it is fine-tuned for especially this machine, being that it's so new. This machine, when I got it, didn't even work with Bamboo Connect. It only worked with Bamboo Studio, and still had a little bit of issue working with Bamboo Handy, although it did work with the mobile app. Bamboo Connect I don't think is as big a deal. I can kind of forgive that because it's not the main slicer. It's not even really a slicer. You can airdrop to your Bamboo printers with it, which I guess what you would probably use it for is multi-machine management and airdropping files that are made in other apps. I don't see much need for it within the Bamboo ecosystem, and seeing as how Bamboo printers basically don't work with other slicers, I'll put an asterisk by that, because technically you can make it work. Every time I've tried, I've run into issues. I went through a big experiment, I guess would be the word, in Orca Slicer and Persis Slicer, where I essentially used a third-party printer profile and G-codes to generate, print G-codes for this machine. But every time that I tried to use any of those G-codes, the extruder would run into the door. It was pushing the extruder out of range far enough that it was hitting the front door. Obviously, we don't want the printer going out of range, so I wasn't able to find exactly how to tweak it to safely correct that. So I said, screw it, and I just went back to Bamboo Studio and got some other things working for me. But the problem we have right now is that all of these slicers are based on one another. It's a problem. So Orca's based on Bamboo Studio. Bamboo Studio is based on Prusa Slicer. Prusa Slicer is based on an old open source slicer from 10 years ago called Slicer, with a 3 for the E in its name. I honestly really liked this back in the days. It obviously didn't have the multicolor stuff. It was pretty bare bones compared to what we have right now, but it was good, and it was partly good because we had 2 slicers we could choose from back then. There might have been others, but there's 2 main ones, and that was Cura by Ultimaker or Slicer. I would default to Slicer, and if its slicing engine couldn't keep up, or if it just didn't have the options I needed, I would hop over to Cura. Cura was less user-friendly, and probably still is, I would say, than Slicer was. But that being said, it did have more options. So we could hop between slicers back then. Now it's all closed ecosystem. None of the other slicers that I have access to have proper profiles for Bamboo printers. And it's becoming the norm. If you get a Snapmaker, Snapmaker has their own fork of Orca Slicer. If you get a FlashForge, they've got their own fork of Orca Slicer. It's becoming the norm, and it sucks. It really sucks. Because, one, they're all the same slicer engine, guys. the basic engine that is doing the G-code for you is the same piece of crap in every single one of them. And the problem with that is Prusa Slicer has some crash issues and bugs. Do you think they got fixed before they got turned into Bamboo Studio? No. Do you think they got fixed before they got ported over to Orca Slicer? No. So what we have is the same bugs carried through every ecosystem, the same engine and lack of alternative carried through every ecosystem, and all of these companies still not being willing to support each other's hardware, software, or anything else. So for every brand of printer you get, if it isn't something open source like a Voron or something like that, you basically have to use a different slicer. Different profiles, set up all your filaments again. It is dumb. It is not user-friendly. Oh, we've got a little strand there, but it's pretty thin. I don't think it's going to be a problem. Looking okay. We'll see another look at it here. Can't even see it so far. Oh, there it is. So that's going to get paved over. That's going to be a non-issue. If this layer doesn't pave that down, the next one will. I am not concerned with that. It's a very fine thread, and it's probably the result of, I'm guessing, something just kind of touching the side of the nozzle. See how it's got a little strand there? That's essentially something being stretched off the side of the nozzle. Should be paving over it. Yeah, definitely paving over that. It's going to be a non-issue. It's not even going to show up because it's so fine. It's going to get blended into the lines of this layer. So by the time we get the rest of this layer down and another layer on top of it, that's not even going to be visible, I don't think. Maybe. Probably not. Anyways, I believe I was rambling about slicers. So yeah, we did used to have a couple more options back in the days that basically were universal. We had universal slicer compatibility. And quite frankly, this closed ecosystem nonsense isn't helping anyone. You guys are manufacturers, are only working on the development they're doing only applies to their products. Whereas back in the days, you had a third-party group that was trying to support everybody behind each slicer. And now it's like, sure, Bamboo can fix something in Bamboo Studio, but is there any point really in the long run for 3D printing as an industry? Well, no, it really only helps Bamboo, doesn't it? So none of this effort is collaborative. None of this, bug fixing and stuff is gonna that Bamboo does, if they do any, which is, I'm sure they do some, but it's underwhelming is what I'll say. None of it's gonna help the industry in general. It's literally not providing any springboard growth for future development for anything other than their machines. So now, your Snapmakers and Flash Forges and Prusas of the world get to redo that work again. Or just not bother, which is what happens more often than not, and just leave the problems in. So you end up with a less stable ecosystem, you end up with a less stable slicer, and less stable environment to work in for your printing. So, is open source better? Well, not necessarily, but I think it's better in that regard, where the effort that one group puts in can help the industry instead of just their users. So I sincerely hope that this changes, but it's been moving the wrong direction. And yeah, open source doesn't fix everything. I'm not that guy. You know, don't think that I am hyping open source. But we do need open source. If there isn't open source, mad scientists like me don't have anything we can play with. We don't get the opportunity to work and make improvements on things when they're not open source. And people like me, we do fix things. We do find workarounds and share them for other people. So that's one of the community things I like about 3D printing is someone's got a problem. Chances are they can find some help for it. You know, and if someone does something cool and new, chances are they can share it with the rest of the industry, or at least communities they're in, and have it kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, diffuse and distribute from there. So I think there is definitely some benefit we've lost that we had with open source that these closed ecosystems aren't providing anymore, or aren't providing as well. But at the same time, we've had some pretty impressive growth in the industry. I think that the user base has changed. There's a lot more new users than there used to be. It's less of the old dogs like me that have been at it for 10 to 12 years, and a lot more I'm brand new to this type users, and that's awesome. You do get a lot of easier questions and easier troubleshooting coming up, where because they're newer users, they don't actually know the same things we know already, and there's a bit of a learning curve for them that maybe they got told it was plug and play. You know, maybe they got told if you buy this machine, you plug it in and you just print to it and it works. There's some truth to that, but I don't think that these machines are actually that plug and play. I know people that don't change any settings, but I don't think you're doing yourself a service limiting yourself that way. I think knowing how to tune things is going to be beneficial to you in the long run. We've got a little bit of a goober there, but here we go. We're starting this circular print, and the cool thing about this is we get to see all sides of that bead as it's going around. I think it's gonna look really cool because we get to see it changing directions so continuously, and it is one continuous path, as you can see. There's no stop and start. There shouldn't be any strands coming off of it as it jumps around. There's no oozing opportunity because it's always just printing. So my hope is that this just smooth from start to finish on this layer. And so far it is. So this is a different viewing experience. A 0.42 millimeter layer height is insane. That's as thick as I can print with a 0.6 millimeter nozzle, which, if you know your machines, a 0.4 is the standard, and a 0.2 or 0.25 is fine. So we're on the chunky side, and we are printing a 0.42 millimeter layer height, which I literally have never printed this thick before. I've never had a reason to. But as you can see, this is definitely easy to see that extrusion going down onto that layer, printing into place, which is exactly what I was hoping for. So that's half of what I was hoping for. The other half of it was transparency. Thicker lines, hotter temperatures, they print clearer than thin lines and normal temps. So what I've done here is I've bumped the temperature up to about 145 C. I could go hotter, but at this Speed, I don't think it's needed. I think it's just gonna go. We've mellowed out the speeds a little bit on this one, partly for viewing and partly for reliability. PETG has pretty good layer bonding, but I think you can be pretty aggressive with it without having issues, but it is a more stringy, blobby material just on the whole than PLA is. So this is running, what speed are we running? This is layer 2 and it's top surface. So I think our speed, find the right part here. Yeah, we're running for top surface 150 millimeters a second, but we are running in silent mode, which divides that by 2. So we're doing about 7.5 centimeters a second at top speed, which it seems like we're not even going that fast. We might not even be going that fast. This might be 75 millimeters a second. But our slicer was set to 150 millimeters a second top speed for top surfaces. This is a top surface because the layers are so thick that it's only going to take 2 layers to get it to its design thickness. And the actual design thickness is 1 millimeter, but we're actually only going to have 0.84 because of bounding, essentially. There is not enough room in that space, that 1 millimeter thickness of the part, for a third layer of 0.42. That would put us at 1.26, which is too high over top of that 1 millimeter for most applications that need precision. Adding that extra thickness and just kind of pretending it's the same probably isn't safe for some applications. So I think that what we've got going on right now is probably good. Yeah, this is the thickest I've ever laid layer lines down, and it looks really cool. It almost looks like, with the different surfaces and reflections underneath, almost looks like wet pavement, like it's flying, like it's like the Flash flying around like a bullet in circles around this path through what looks like wet streets almost. You can even see the reflection of the nozzle in the PETG, which is pretty cool. You don't get that very often with material like this. This isn't reflective, this is transparent, but it is creating some reflection. So I think it's going to be really cool. Oh, scored. I think it's going to look really cool when it's done. I think it's going to be really transparent with just 2 thick layers like this. And the idea was to be able to see through at least well enough to tell what color's inside. And I think it's going to work. It's tough to say, but the thicker lines and the hotter temperatures lend themselves to less optical distortion as the light passes through. So the last time I printed this print, it was 0.1 millimeter layers. You can see I still have in the bottom corner, I have the wrong print information. We are not doing 0.1 millimeter layers this time. These are 0.42, very chonky. But so we've gone from 10 layers to make 1 millimeter thickness, and actually landing at 1 millimeter thick, down to 2 layers to get as close as we can to that 1 millimeter thick, which is going to be 0.84. So that's That's a night and day difference. Going from 0.1 to 0.42 is probably the largest layer thickness jump I've ever done as well. I can print probably 0.05 millimeter layers, maybe even thinner, with a fine nozzle. But I think the thinnest I could do is probably 0.1 with this nozzle. Maybe even 0.12. It might need to be thicker to accommodate the diameter that it is and still look proper. The thicker nozzle diameters can do thicker layers than the fine ones, so this is literally as fat as I can push at the moment. They do make a 0.8 nozzle for this machine. I do not own it. Someday we'll be able to do an even more dramatic, wider line widths as well as thicker line thicknesses. I bet you with a 0.8 we can get to 0.5 millimeter layers, which is ridiculous. Any, angled slopes that rely on, the layer changes for their height changes and their resolution would look so rough even with this layer height. Like 0.3 millimeter is what you'd call draft quality. 0.2 is what you'd call okay, I guess. And 0.1 is what you'd call, good, high quality. Anything finer, I guess you might classify as ultra high or super high. But you need the thin layers to get that good resolution on angled surfaces. This wouldn't have it. This would be giant staircase for every diagonal slope compared to what the 0.1 millimeter layers would do. Even 0.2 millimeters, you get more than twice as many layers per millimeter. So it's more than twice the resolution just going to a 0.2 millimeter layer. It's pretty interesting. The camera gets used on this machine for a lot of things. And it's not just for viewing like what we're doing right now. It also tells the printer what print bed is installed and whether or not the silicone sock is in place. It's pretty funny. It lowers the print bed so that it gets a good angle on the little barcode. It's almost like a QR. It's a square with part of it colored. You can't really see it right now in any of the views that we've got. But if you look in the Bamboo Studio one, it'd be right around where the cord touches the build plate now. Right around there where that cord is. So what it does is it lowers the build plate, looks at the camera for that barcode, and tries to verify that the build plate is the one that was specified in the slicer. I have the error message turned off for incorrect build plate, so if it's not able to detect it, it just assumes I know what I'm doing, because I do. I appreciate that I could turn that setting off and disable that warning, because there's no need for someone like me to receive that warning. I know what build plate is installed. I even know whether the machine needs to do a leveling or not before it ever checks its leveling. So I really don't need that. The silicone sock warning, what it does is it brings the nozzle right over to the camera and parks right in front of it and says, "Look at me, look at me, look at me." And the camera says, yeah, okay, I can see your thing. Which those lines in the nozzle cam, you can see at the very top of the frame, the three, I think they're green or orange, I'm colorblind, but those three bars, that's what the camera's looking for. If it doesn't see those, then it says your silicone sock isn't in place. You might have thermal problems. You might have thermal runaway because you're not retaining that heat. So it has to just run the living crap out of the heater. And that means that up higher in the tube gets more what's called heat creep. And you'll have filament melting up top. And then possibly even cooling up top as well. And that's how you get nozzle jams. You get melting happening out of the melt zone. And it turns into a soupy mess inside. And you're not getting any pressure. You're not getting any flow. It essentially clogs off and print failure. Hopefully you can save the nozzle and unjam it, but sometimes they're done. Sometimes they're messed. They're just basically trash afterwards. If you do get a nozzle jam, your first option is to try and clear it with heat before doing a cold pull. Cold pull is just harder on the hot end, right? Some of these things, they have sensors in them. Some of them have heaters in them as well. You can pull too hard on those things. They're not meant to be yanked on, but usually they're made to handle a little bit of extra heat. So if you can, do a hot push before doing a cold pull. That's my advice. Is a hot push going to make it worse? Not usually. Usually it's either going to work or not. If you're already jammed... Oh, we picked up a little thread there. If you're already jammed, you're already jammed. You know, you're not getting anything through by normal means either way. So you might as well try and blast it. And when I say a hot push, I mean really hot. And you basically want it just blowing through liquid. You want to just shove as much of that through as liquid as you can, and hopefully the stuff that's up higher that wasn't supposed to melt to begin with gets pushed through before more material that high up melts. So fingers crossed that works and you don't need to do a cold pull. But if you have to do a cold pull, I think 120C with PLA is your safest bet. If it doesn't work at 120, heat up again, cool back down to say 125 and try again. If you really need to, repeat with 5 degrees hotter, try again. Usually by 130 you've got your pull. You get a better pull at 120, but if you can't get it, you can't get it. You know, you don't want to break more filament off in the hot end. You don't want to be causing worse issues. So if you have to go to 125 or 130, you just do. But generally, you get a good pull with PLA at 120. I think Pet G, it's more like 130, 140, where I get a good pull. You can do it at lower temps, but it might just be too hard. I can't even remember what temperature works with ABS. It's been too long since I've done one, so I don't want to give you bad information. I'm just gonna let you guys look that one up. I'm not going to at this very time, but I do know you can dry most Pet G up to 75C before you risk thermal degradation of the material. PLA is more like 55C for a do not exceed temperature. ABS and ASA is more like 100. If you're heating it over 100 repeatedly, you might get material degradation. The stuff just handles heat so much better, especially ASA. ASA, you can pound heat into that stuff all day long, especially during printing. and it just loves it, up until it doesn't. But it even printed parts in ASA do have a lot more heat tolerance, which is the main reason to use it. It doesn't have very good UV tolerance. Or does it? Yes, it does. ASA has great UV tolerance and good heat tolerance. If you can print ASA parts, you can make things that are, engine adjacent, but not engine components, I would say. You can get up to some pretty good heat with ASA printed parts before they start to soften. So definitely a lot better than PLA. You look at PLA too warmly and it starts to warp on you. So I have warped a few nozzle cam mounts in my day, and usually they keep working even with some warping, but it can cause issues. The one I'm using right now is actually printed in the very material we're printing with right now. The exact same spool, in fact. That is Polyolite PETG. It's their classic PETG formula, not their new fancy one, not their high-speed one, It's their classic transparent. It's great stuff. It's on the whole. I have dried it quite well, and it is printing out of a filament dryer right now. I don't know if the AMS2 Pro will dry and print PETG at the same time. I know it will for high-spec stuff, but I know it won't for PLA, so it might be in that bracket as well, where it thinks it's going to get too soft to feed reliably through the AMS if it's being preheated and dried at the same time. This kind of tells me, though, what's going on right now and how well it's working, that preheating the filament and drying at the same time is actually going to be good for PETG. This has been pretty reliable as far as PETG goes. We've had a couple of strands that got picked up, but not even enough to make a proper death blob, So those are, although they're noticeable, they're negligible at the same time. You can find them if you look for them. You might be able to see something in the final print, but I'm guessing we can't. Especially with transparent. There are so many lines we can see already that I bet you it doesn't even show up where any of those minor flaws were or where that material even originated from. You can definitely see the seam there, though. I'm running aligned seams, so they're all in one place. I kind of just don't like seeing the little pock marks that randomized seams leaves everywhere. If they're all in one place, at least you can hide that for a photo here and there, you know what I mean? Still get a nice look. And hopefully if you have to do any touch-ups, you shouldn't, right? Like the seam should still be fairly dimensionally accurate, but they can be a little bit different. And you can tell there's definitely some thickness change there at that seam. But that being said, it shouldn't be so far out of whack that I need to use sandpaper on it. If, however, I do need to do touch-ups to this part afterwards, having them seams all in one place means I don't have to chase them around and scuff up the surface of the entire part, chasing all those seams. They're all aligned. I can take a single cut metal file. Oh, I've broken Bamboo Studio. Sorry, that'll be back in a second. I can take a single cut metal file that does minimal change to the surface. We're just gonna refresh all the cameras here. They're gonna pop back up in no time. They're just they build up a little bit of desync because they do have internal buffering on the Wise cams. I have it disabled, but sometimes you still can't get around a little bit of desync. So there's actually delay on the nozzle camera and the potato camera to bring them into line so that they see, at least right now, the nozzle camera and the others kind of line up where it is positionally. Over time it drifts. I can't even remember what I was saying before, but that's okay. We're just about done this print. I think there's just a handful of minutes left. And because these passes are only a few passes per layer, it's going to be real quick per layer. And they're so thick, you know, there's only so much wall there. I think these walls are about 1 millimeter, so it's kind of doing 2.5 passes to maintain that wall thickness. But there's also a filleted edge on this part that I did at the very top, so it's just gonna round it out a little bit, give it a nicer lip. But I'm gonna let this print and then take a little bit of a breather from talking, and then we will be back and look at it when it's done. plate. I've had a quick look at this, got it off the build plate, and look at this thing. You can definitely see both patterns. Can see that octagram spiral right through those Archimedean chord lines. You can see my fingers right through it. So I think this turned out pretty well. The spiral definitely turned out really clean. You can hardly even see it. The octagram underneath is what I can see a lot more. So the Archimedean chord spiral on top is blended in. The surface feels really good. I can't even feel any imperfections in the surface, and it's really strong. Like I'm flexing this, and yeah, it is definitely stronger than your average yogurt container lid. I'm flexing this in my hand, and it's really not even showing, but here, let me see. There we go. Yeah, you can see it flexing there. Look how strong that is. That would be folding the yogurt container lid in half, so I'm definitely happy with the strength, considering that it's only 2 layers of lid. I'm happy with the clarity. You can see through it pretty well, and I think it's going to show the color looking through it, so I'll be able to see what waste material I have in the bucket. So, really happy with how this turned out. Those reflective surfaces are just a nice touch with that octagram spiral. So how many people were a little bit hypnotized when it started doing spirals? I think within 30 seconds of it starting to do that top spirally layer, I think I zoned out and was just watching for a little bit too long there, considering that I'm also recording a video. So if you were hypnotized, drop me a comment, because trust me, you're not alone. I, even after having these cameras for years, still find myself zoning out. It usually goes something like, I look at the nozzle camera, I look at the top camera, I look at the front camera, look back at the nozzle camera, I look at my computer clock, and it's been 10 minutes. Oh, whoops. So if you were hypnotized by this video, you're not alone. Drop me a comment, say I was hypnotized too, because I hope it's not just me. Maybe I am feeble-minded, but I like to think that it's more of a universal thing. But if it's just me, to be like, no, it's just you, Slack, you're feeble-minded. Tell me, if you did make it through the entire video, thank you. I honestly know it's a lot and a little bit repetitive, but I enjoy these. I still love watching the nozzle camera, checking on how things are going. So if you like it as well, thank you for your interest in I guess you could call this content. And thank you so much for your time. I know that there are only so many hours in a day, and you can only spend them each once. So if you've chosen to hang out and listen to me ramble and watch my machines run, well, my hat's off to you. I hope you are all doing well, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.